Have you ever noticed your body feels tense, even when nothing seems wrong? Many people believe stress comes from difficult situations, but often it comes from something quieter, something happening inside us before we even realize it. A thought, a memory, a familiar tightening in the chest. Over time, the mind learns to stay alert. Not because life is always dangerous, but because it once had to be. In this video, we will gently explore how ancient Buddhist wisdom and modern psychology point to the same truth. Freedom is not about fixing yourself. It begins when you understand what your body and mind have been trying to protect. If you're watching this, you don't need to agree with everything. Just listen at your own pace and notice what resonates quietly within you. This is Son.Mindfulness, a space to pause, reflect, and return to what truly matters. Part 1. Touching the nervous system, not the intellect. Have you ever noticed this? You're not doing anything wrong. You're not in danger. You're not even rushing. You're just sitting there, maybe on your couch, maybe in a quiet room, scrolling slowly, breathing without thinking much about it. And then, almost without warning, your chest tightens. Not sharply, not dramatically, just enough for you to notice. Not because something actually happened, but because something might happen. A message that hasn't arrived yet. A memory that suddenly knocks on the door. A thought that says, "What if?" And right there, in that small moment, your body reacts before your mind has time to explain anything. Your shoulders tense, your breath becomes a little shallower, your heart leans forward, as if preparing for something unknown. Pause with me for a moment. This reaction, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're anxious by nature. And it certainly doesn't mean you failed at being mindful. It means you are human. I've sat with many people over the years. Good people, thoughtful people, people who meditate, who pray, who read spiritual books, and they've whispered the same question to me. Why does this still happen, even when nothing is wrong? Maybe you've asked yourself that too. And I want you to hear this gently. This video is not here to teach you something new. It's not here to fix you. And it's not here to give you another technique to remember. It's here to remind you of something you already know, something your body remembers, even if your mind has forgotten. A way of feeling that was never lost, only covered. I'll leave you with this question as we begin. When your body tightens like that, what is it trying to protect? And what happens when you simply listen? Part 2. The invisible battle. Modern suffering does not come from events, but from interpretation. Most of your suffering does not come from life itself. It doesn't come from the moment you're in. It comes from the meaning your mind quietly adds to that moment. Life happens, and then the mind speaks. Something small occurs. A tone of voice that feels slightly colder than usual. A reply that arrives later than you expected. A look that lingers just half a second too long. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, and yet, something inside you tightens. Have you noticed how quickly that happens? Before you can explain it, your body is already on alert. Your heart begins to race as if preparing for bad news. Your shoulders rise as if bracing for impact. Your breathing shifts, becoming shorter, quieter, guarded. And you might tell yourself, I'm overreacting. I shouldn't feel this way. I thought I was past this. But listen carefully. This is not weakness. This is conditioning. One woman once told me very softly, I feel foolish. Nothing happened. But my body acted like everything was about to fall apart. And I said to her, your body isn't foolish, it's just loyal to an old memory. You see, your brain is not a camera. It doesn't simply record what is happening and present it to you as it is. Your brain is a simulator. It is constantly asking, what does this remind me of? What happened last time? How do I protect us now? It doesn't show you reality. It predicts reality, and it predicts danger based on old data. Data from conversations that ended painfully, from moments when you were misunderstood, from times when silence meant rejection, from seasons when you had to stay alert just to get through the day. The mind takes all of that, compresses it into a split second, and sends a message to the body, be ready. And the older the wound, the louder that message becomes. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine you're driving using an old map, one drawn many years ago before roads were repaired, before bridges were rebuilt, before detours were removed. You trust that map because it once kept you safe, but now it keeps warning you of dangers that no longer exist. This is how many of us live. We're not responding to what is actually happening. We're responding to what once happened. And this is where modern suffering quietly grows. Not because life is always harsh, but because the mind is always interpreting. In Buddhist psychology, this is where pain turns into suffering. The event itself is often neutral, but the interpretation, that's where the fire begins. Modern psychology calls this a threat response, a cognitive bias, a learned pattern of emotional regulation. The Buddha simply observed it and said, "Look closely. Suffering arises with contact, but it deepens with interpretation." And here's the part many people miss. You don't choose these reactions. They arise before choice, so there is no need for blame, no need for shame. I've seen people who lived gentle lives, who raised families, who worked hard and tried to be kind, yet inside, their nervous systems never learned how to rest. Not because they failed, but because they adapted. The body learned to stay alert because once upon a time being alert was necessary. So if this is you, if your heart reacts before your mind understands, please hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. Your system is doing what it was trained to do. The real question is not, why am I like this? The real question is much quieter and much kinder. What old story is my mind still telling? And am I willing to see it without fighting it, just for a moment? I'll leave you with that question as we continue. Part 3. When the map replaces the world. When attention leaves reality and follows memory. Here is one of the quiet tragedies of being human, so quiet that most of us never notice it happening. We don't actually live in the world as it is. We live in the map of the world that exists inside our minds. A map drawn slowly over many years. Drawn with past hurts that were never fully spoken. With unfinished conversations that still echo when things go quiet. With moments we were too overwhelmed to process, so we carried them forward instead. At first, this map is useful. It helps us survive, it helps us avoid danger, it helps us learn. But then something subtle happens. We forget that it is only a map. We start mistaking it for reality itself. And so when life does something unexpected, when a person acts differently than we hoped, when a situation doesn't follow the familiar pattern, we don't respond to what is happening now. We respond to what once happened. Have you ever noticed that? Someone says a simple sentence, and suddenly you're not here anymore. You're back in another time, another room, another version of yourself. Your body reacts as if the past has returned. A man once shared with me, "I know my wife isn't my father, but when she goes quiet, my body feels the same fear I felt as a child." Nothing in the present moment was dangerous, but the map said otherwise. This is not a personal failure. This is how the human mind works. The mind does not ask, what is happening right now? It asks, what does this resemble? And the moment it finds a match, attention shifts away from the present toward memory. In Buddhism, this is where suffering begins, not at the event itself, not at the sound, the word, or the look, but at misplaced attention. Attention leaves what is happening and lands on what once hurt. And when attention moves, the whole body follows. The Buddha did not say that life would never bring difficulty. He said that suffering deepens when we stop seeing clearly, when we stop seeing the present moment and start seeing through the lens of the past. Modern psychology says something similar, in different words. It tells us that the brain is constantly predicting, using old experiences to make sense of new situations. But prediction is not perception. A map is not the territory. And yet, most of us spend our lives reacting to the map as if it were the world itself. I want you to imagine this gently. Imagine walking through a familiar neighborhood with an old map in your hands. The map warns of a broken bridge, but the bridge was repaired years ago. It shows a road closed, but it has been open all this time. If you trust the map more than your eyes, you will live cautiously, even when the path is clear. This is what happens inside us. The present moment may be safe. The person in front of us may mean no harm. But the map tightens the body anyway, and we don't even realize that we're following it. So the work is not to destroy the map. The map once protected you. The work is to remember, again and again, that it is only a map, and to gently return attention to what is actually here. I'll leave you with this reflection as we move on. In this very moment, are you responding to life as it is, or to a memory that still wants to be heard? Part 4. Yoniso Manasikara. The lost art of wise attention. There's a beautiful phrase in early Buddhist teaching, Yoniso Manasikara. It's often translated as wise attention, but I want to tell you what it really feels like. Wise attention is not positive thinking. It's not telling yourself everything is fine when it clearly isn't. It's not suppression, pushing uncomfortable feelings down and pretending they don't exist. And it's certainly not spiritual bypassing, using spiritual words to avoid human pain. Wise attention is much quieter than all of that. It is the simple, honest ability to see what is actually happening without adding anything extra. I've met many sincere practitioners over the years who thought mindfulness meant staying calm all the time. They believed that if sadness or fear arose, they had somehow failed. But Yoniso Manasikara asks something very different. It asks gently, what is actually happening right now? Not what you think is happening, not what you fear might happen, but what is actually here in this moment. Then it asks a second question, one that takes courage. What am I adding? Am I adding an old story, an assumption, a memory that doesn't belong to this moment? And finally, it asks perhaps the most revealing question of all. What am I remembering instead of seeing? A woman once shared this with me. She said, whenever someone criticizes me, even lightly, I feel like I'm 12 years old again, standing in front of my mother, trying not to cry. Nothing in the present moment was unbearable, but attention had quietly left the present and returned to a much older scene. Yoniso Manasikara does not judge that movement. It simply notices it. Most people don't suffer because life is always hard. Life has its challenges, yes, but many moments are actually quite neutral. We suffer because attention is hijacked, pulled away from what is real by fear disguised as thought. The thought sounds reasonable, it sounds logical, it says, I'm just being careful, but underneath there is fear. Fear of being hurt again, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing something precious. Wise attention sees this without trying to fix it immediately. It says, this is fear. Not as a criticism, as a recognition, and something remarkable happens when fear is seen clearly. It softens. Not because you forced it to leave, but because it no longer needs to hide. In modern psychology, we would call this emotional regulation, the ability to stay present with a feeling without being overwhelmed by it. The Buddha observed the same process long ago, without any modern terms. He saw that when attention is clear, suffering cannot take root, not because pain disappears, but because confusion does. And I want to be honest with you here. Even after years of practice, I still catch myself adding stories. I still notice attention drifting into memory. I still feel the body tighten sometimes before wisdom arrives. Practice does not make us perfect. It makes us honest. It teaches us to return again and again to what is actually here. So as you listen to this, I invite you to ask very gently, in this moment, what is actually happening in me? And what am I quietly adding to it? I'll leave you with that question as we continue. Part 5. The Gap. Where freedom actually lives. There is something the Buddha saw very clearly, and yet most of us overlook it again and again. Between what happens and how you react, there is a space. It's not dramatic, it doesn't announce itself, and if you're not looking gently, you might miss it completely. But it is there. Small, subtle, quiet, and inside that space is your freedom. Not the freedom to control life. Not the freedom to make everything go your way. But the freedom to not become the story your mind is about to tell. Most of us believe our reactions are immediate, automatic, inevitable. Something happens and we say, I couldn't help it. But if you slow things down just a little, you begin to notice something else. A pause, a breath, a moment where nothing has been decided yet. This is what Viktor Frankl later described in psychology, and what the Buddha pointed to long before. In that space lies choice, not a loud choice. Not an intellectual one, a quiet choice about where attention goes next. Let's pause here together. Right now, as you're listening, I want to invite you into a small experiment, not as a technique, but as a moment of remembering. Notice your hands, not the idea of your hands, not the word hands, the actual sensation, the temperature, warm or cool, the pressure, resting, holding, touching. The contact with fabric, with skin, with air. Stay with that for just a moment. Nothing special is required. You're not trying to calm yourself. You're not trying to change anything. You're simply here. This is not a meditation technique. This is not something to master. This is remembering where you are when the mind begins to wander. When attention drops into the body, the story loses its grip. The past cannot survive very long in direct sensation. Fear softens. Thoughts slow. Not because you pushed them away, but because you didn't follow them. This is the gap, and every time you touch it, even for half a second, you taste a different kind of freedom. A freedom that doesn't depend on life being perfect. A freedom that doesn't require years of practice or special conditions. Just presence. I want to be honest with you. I don't live in this space all the time. No one does. Even now, there are moments when I get pulled into stories, when reaction arrives before awareness. But the practice is not to stay in the gap forever. The practice is to return again and again without judgment. Each return strengthens something quiet inside you, not control, but trust. So I'll leave you with this question to carry gently. In the next moment when something tightens inside you, can you pause just long enough to notice the space before the story begins? Part 6. Tanha, the addiction to feeling different. When the present moment is no longer enough, in Buddhist psychology, there is a simple word that explains so much of our inner struggle. Tanha. It's often translated as craving, but not craving in the way we usually think about it. Not just desire for food or money or possessions. Tanha is deeper than that. It is the quiet, unconscious need for this moment to be different than it is. I want you to feel that for a moment, not understand it, feel it. That subtle sense of something needs to change, I need to feel better, this shouldn't be happening, I'll be okay once this passes. That movement inside, that leaning away from what is, that is tanha. We crave relief, we crave certainty, we crave validation, we crave control, not because we are greedy, but because uncertainty feels unsafe. I once spoke with a man in his 70s who had practiced meditation for decades. He said to me, almost embarrassed. I still want peace so badly, and when I don't feel it, I get angry at myself. That honesty stayed with me, because even the wish for peace can become a form of craving. The mind says, I'll accept this moment once it changes. And the moment craving appears, peace disappears. Not because the moment became worse, but because the present moment is no longer enough. This is one of the most difficult truths to see clearly. We think suffering comes from pain. But very often, suffering comes from our resistance to pain, from the belief that this experience should not be here. The Buddha observed this again and again. He didn't say craving makes us bad. He said craving makes us tired. Because craving pulls us out of life and into negotiation. We're no longer living the moment, we're bargaining with it. I'll stay present if you calm down. I'll accept this if it goes away soon. I'll be at peace when things are certain again. But life does not sign that contract. And so we remain restless. Modern psychology sees the same pattern through a different lens. The nervous system seeks regulation. It wants safety, predictability, reassurance, and when it doesn't find them, it reaches for distraction, for control, for certainty. None of this is wrong. It's human. But here is the quiet insight that changes everything. Peace does not come when the moment finally becomes what we want. Peace comes when we stop needing it to be different. This doesn't mean you like everything. It doesn't mean you approve of pain. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop fighting reality as it unfolds. And that is not weakness. That is maturity. I want to leave you with this gentle question to sit with as we continue. In this moment, what am I asking life to change before I allow myself to be at peace? Part 7. Modern Psychology Meets Ancient Wisdom. Different language. The same human nervous system. In modern psychology, what we've been talking about has many names. They call it emotional dysregulation, when feelings rise faster than the system can hold them. They call it cognitive bias, the mind's habit of filtering reality through old assumptions and fears. They call it the threat response, the nervous system staying on guard long after the danger has passed. Different terms, different textbooks, but the same human nervous system. The Buddha observed this over 2,500 years ago, without brain scans, without clinical language. He simply watched the mind, the body, and the way suffering repeats itself. And what he saw was not pathology. He saw a struggle inside the human heart between what is happening and what we believe should be happening. This is why healing does not come from fixing yourself. There is nothing broken to fix. Most people who come to me have already tried that. They've tried improving themselves. They've tried correcting their thoughts. They've tried becoming calmer, wiser, more spiritual. And underneath all that effort, there's often a quiet exhaustion, because fixing implies a problem. And when you believe you are the problem, the nervous system never truly rests. Healing comes from something very different. It comes from stopping the internal fight, from no longer arguing with your own experience, from allowing fear to be present without trying to conquer it, from letting sadness move through without labeling it as failure. In therapy, this is called acceptance. In neuroscience, it's called integration. In Buddhism, it's simply called seeing clearly. When the mind stops fighting itself, something begins to reorganize naturally. The body breathes more freely. Thoughts lose their urgency. Emotions pass through instead of getting stuck. I've seen this happen in very ordinary moments. A woman once said to me, "I stopped trying to calm down, and suddenly I did." That's not a technique. That's a shift in relationship, from control to understanding, from resistance to presence. Ancient wisdom and modern science meet right here. Not in complex theories, but in this simple truth. What you allow softens. What you fight persists. And as we move forward, I invite you to hold this gently. What if your healing does not require more effort, but less fighting? I'll leave you with that reflection as we continue. Part 8. You are not broken. A message the nervous system needs to hear. I want you to let this land gently, not just in your mind, but somewhere deeper. There is nothing wrong with you, not something small, not something hidden, nothing. Your anxiety is not a flaw in your character. Your overthinking is not a failure of discipline or faith. They are adaptations. Ways your system learned to protect you when protection was once necessary. I've sat with many people who carry a quiet shame. They say things like, I should be over this by now, or, other people seem fine. Why am I still like this? And each time I feel the same sadness. Because what they call a weakness was once a form of intelligence. Hypervigilance kept you safe. Overthinking helped you anticipate pain. Emotional sensitivity helped you read the room when it mattered. These responses did not appear by accident. They appeared because, at some point in your life, they worked. But adaptations are not meant to last forever. They are meant to be thanked and gently released when the environment changes. Most suffering continues not because these patterns exist, but because we judge them. We fight them. We try to push them away. We tell ourselves we shouldn't feel what we feel, and that fight keeps the nervous system on edge. What these parts of you need now is not force, not discipline, not another strategy. They need understanding. Understanding says, I see why you're here. I know what you were trying to do. You don't have to work so hard anymore. This is not indulgence. This is wisdom. Modern neuroscience tells us that safety is not created by control, but by compassion. When the brain senses understanding, the alarm system begins to quiet down. The Buddha taught this in a different way. He said suffering ends not through punishment, but through insight, through seeing things as they are without adding cruelty. I want to be honest with you. There are still days when I notice old patterns in myself, moments when the mind races, when the body tightens, when patience feels thin. And in those moments what helps most is not correcting myself. It is remembering, this is an old habit, not a personal failure. And that remembering changes everything. So as you listen to this, I invite you to ask yourself, without urgency, without pressure, if there's nothing wrong with me, what might soften right now? I'll leave you with that question as we continue. Part 9. Practice, returning without escape. The courage to stay. As we come to this point, I want to speak very simply, not about theory, not about philosophy, but about practice, the kind that meets you right in the middle of daily life. When emotion arises, and it will, the invitation is not to escape, it is to return. The first place to return is not the mind, but the body. Before you explain what you're feeling, before you analyze it, feel the body first. Where do you notice it? In the chest, the throat, the stomach, the jaw? You don't need to change it. You don't need to relax it. Just notice. Then, very gently, name the sensation, not the story. Tight, warm, heavy, restless. Not, I'm being rejected. Not, this always happens. Not, I shouldn't feel this way. Those are stories, and stories pull us away. Sensation brings us home. I once worked with a man who said, if I don't think my way out of fear, I'll drown in it. What he discovered slowly was the opposite. When he stopped trying to fix the fear and simply stayed with the sensation, it passed on its own. This staying is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is not passivity. It is courage. The courage to stay present without running, to feel without fleeing, to allow without collapsing. In Buddhism, this is not weakness. It is virya, steady, grounded effort. The effort to remain, not to escape. Modern neuroscience tells us something similar. When you stay with sensation without resistance, the nervous system completes its cycle. Energy moves, the body discharges, the mind settles. Nothing is forced, something is allowed. I want to be honest with you. There are moments when I still want to escape, to distract myself, to move away from discomfort quickly. And sometimes I do. Practice is not perfection. Practice is remembering and returning when you can. Even 1 second of staying changes the relationship. So the next time an emotion arises, perhaps later today, perhaps tomorrow morning, I invite you to try this. Can I feel this just as sensation without needing it to go away? And if you can't, can you notice that too, with kindness? I'll leave you with this question to carry with you. When discomfort appears, can I meet it as a visitor, instead of something to escape from? Part 10. The Quiet Conclusion. A freedom that knows how to return smiling. As we come to the end of our time together, I want to leave you with something simple. Not dramatic, not grand, but true. Freedom is not the absence of pain. If that were the requirement, very few of us would ever be free. Freedom is the ability to return without getting lost, to come back to the body, to come back to this moment, to come back to yourself again and again, even after you've wandered. You don't need to be enlightened. You don't need to be calm all the time. You don't need to have a quiet mind or a perfect practice. Those ideas often become another place where we judge ourselves. What you need is much smaller than that. You only need one thing: the willingness to stop believing every thought that passes through you. Thoughts will still arise, memories will still surface, fear may still knock on the door. But you no longer have to follow each one as if it were the truth. You can notice, you can pause, you can return. And in that stopping, not a forceful stopping, but a gentle one, life slowly opens again. Breath becomes fuller, the body softens, moments feel a little more real. Not because life changed, but because you did not leave it. I want to be honest with you. There will still be days when you forget all of this. Days when you get lost in stories. Days when returning feels hard. That does not erase the path. The path is not something you walk once and finish. It is something you recognize when you remember to look, and every time you return, even imperfectly, you are practicing freedom. So I'll leave you with this final reflection, not as a task, but as a gentle companion. When the next thought arises and asks you to follow it, can you pause and choose to return instead? That returning, again and again, is where your life quietly waits for you.